Hello and welcome to the National Security Conversation. On the 14th of June, the Government of India announced the Agnipath scheme for recruiting soldiers into the Indian Armed Forces. According to the scheme, all recruitments will now be for a 4-year period, after which up to 25% of the recruits may be retained for a more extended tenure. The remainder, 3/4 will be retired with a lump sum amount of approximately rupees 12 lakhs and no pension. The new scheme did not go down well with the aspirants. By the 16th of June, protests erupted across the country and turned violent in many places. Railway stations and tracks were stormed and as many as 12 trains were set ablaze. In the week since then, more than 600 trains have been cancelled across the country. Amidst the chaos, the government machinery has gone into an overdrive to convince the country of the scheme's merits. To assuage the aspirants, the government announced a relaxation of the age limit for the first batch of recruits in 2022. Many candidates at various stages for the selection process have suddenly found that all their previous efforts have come to nothing. Meanwhile, the government has justified the scheme as essential to bring down the soldiers' average age and the massive personnel and pension costs that soak up a significant share of India's defense budget. The Indian Armed Forces are at the cusp of a major transformation. At stake is the tri-services integration and theaterization of commands. Any wrong step would jeopardize India's military effectiveness at a time when India is facing a major strategic threat from China in the Himalayas as well as in the Indian Ocean. So, to discuss the Agnipath scheme and understand its implications for the aspiring youth and the Indian Armed Forces, I have with me General Vinod Bhatia. General Bhatia retired from the Indian Army after a distinguished career of 4 decades. He was the Director General of Military Operations of the Indian Army. General Bhatia, welcome to the National Security Conversation.
Thank you very much. Honored.
General Bhatia, in your tweet on the 13th of June this year, you characterized the Agnipath scheme as the, and I quote, death knell for the armed forces, tour of duty not tested, no pilot project, straight implementation, will lead to militarization of society, nearly 40,000, that is 75% of youth, year on year back rejected and dejected without a job, semi-trained in arms, ex-Agniveers, not a good idea, no one gains. General Bhatia, this is one of the strongest criticisms of the Agniveers scheme that I have seen in the recent past. Why do you think this is such a bad idea?
Honestly, now that it's rolled out, I hope and pray that I'm wrong for the sake of the nation, for the sake of the armed forces, for the sake of national security. But my apprehensions and concerns are there, which I need to highlight. So, hopefully, someone will take action. Firstly, we're disturbing a well-established system, a well-established organization which has proven its worth over the years. If you take it from 47 onwards till date, where has the armed forces ever lacked? Even in 1962, Time magazine carried the cover saying Indian Army lacks everything except courage. Right. So till the Galwan 2 years back, we have proved to the Chinese how good we are. We stood by a deployment against the forward deployment by the PLA. We got Kargil, Siachen, Sri Lanka, Maldives, 65 wars, 71, one of the lightning operations, 71 wars. So, and not only operations of military, armed forces ensure peace through preparedness, right? We are disturbing this equilibrium, especially at a time when the world is in a disorder, I must say, with China knocking at our doors, China-Pakistan nexus, a lot of things happening in Ukraine, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Sri Lanka. So I thought this is not the right thing to do, trying to change the DNA of the armed forces. We will need to change the DNA of armed forces. So that is how I tweeted.
General Bhatia, logically speaking, just because things have worked in the past does not mean we don't need to have change in future. So this may be, this may prove to be good in the future. There are all kinds of arguments in favor of this. So just because it has worked in the past does not mean we don't need any changes in the armed forces. Are you saying that the Indian armed forces do not need any changes at all?
There's not a change. It's a massive transformation. I think it is a transformation which is after 1962, we not had such transformations. After even Kargil Review Committee, the group of ministers report was transformative, and there were reforms. But they were not such reforms which change everything. This is trying to change too many things at a point of time. One, how does it impact the combat effectiveness is the key question. We have, that is the main question. How does it impact the combat effectiveness, our operational readiness, our defense preparedness, right? How does it impact our regimental system, which has proven its worth? Two. And the third thing is, does it, we have to, rebalance the budget. There's no doubt about it. I am with it.
Let's come to the budget part, the combat effectiveness part, General. I think that's a very interesting point that you're making. Does Agnipath necessarily reduce the combat effectiveness of the Indian Armed Forces compared to, say, how many, what is the training period we have, and what's the training period that the other armed forces around the world have? Compared to that, do you think this short training period will reduce combat effectiveness?
No, the training period is not the question.
Okay.
The question is a functional organization with its strengths and weaknesses. Combat effectiveness is not training period.
Okay.
Training and knowledge and skill is not a problem at all. I can train a knowledge and skill in 6 months, no issues. Attitude takes a long time training.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah. No, when you talk of attitude, the Indian Armed Forces work on intangibles which drive us to achieve what we achieve. Naam Namang Nishan is one of them. It's very often quoted. I'm not trying to say that is the thing. But if you look at units which they have performed over the years, and even First World War, Second World War, if you look at it, the Indian troops never fought for the British Empire. They fought for the izzat of the unit, izzat of the regiment. If Saragadi, which is a battle, it was fought for the Sikhs. It was not for the British Empire. And in our case, the men, the soldiers, they go back to the villages where they're respected for what they've done in the units, because it's a traditional thing. The base is the same. If you look at the Agnipath scheme, nothing has actually changed the recruitment pattern. Recruitment base remains the same. Recruitment criteria remains the same. Selection system remains the same. What has changed? The terms and conditions of service. We are all talking about recruitment. No. It's the terms and conditions of service where a man will come for 4 years and go back to the society. 25% gets selected. That is what I'm talking about. It is not the recruitment per se. It is the terms and conditions of service.
But how does that affect combat effectiveness? You have a person in the armed forces for 4 years. Say you have a war or conflict breaking out with China or Pakistan. Are you saying that these men will be found wanting in that in such an operation?
Definitely. There will be risk aversion.
Okay.
If I come for 4 years and I'm not sure of my job, why should I take undue risks?
And I don't have retirement benefits.
I don't have retirement benefits. I'm looking over my shoulder to go back. Recent examples, the Ukraine war. You look at Russians. Recent examples, Galwan. The PLA, having learned the lesson in Galwan, where let's respect Colonel Santosh Babu's men, because of them, no more Galwans happened, right? Because of effective retaliation, their ferocious retaliation, I must say, effective. So we didn't find any Galwans. PLA were conscripts mostly, and they ran back. They didn't give a fight the way they other soldiers. So today the PLA, as per some things we read, they are now raising permanent units of permanent soldiers units known as wolf warriors, right? And we are now degrading our strengths and coming back to. If you look at the long term, what will happen? You will have a flux. Soldiers in transition always, uncertain of themselves whether they serve or not. So if X number of soldiers come, only 25% get selected. So what do the soldiers do? He's looking on his shoulder, risk averse. In a high risk job, you cannot have risk aversion.
That's a very interesting point, General Bhatia. You're saying that if you have people in the armed forces just for 4 years, they may not be able to give their heart and mind to the unit that they are serving, to the armed forces, to their duty to the nation, simply because they're just there for just 4 years.
Why should they do it?
That's
right now, the soldier serves 17 years. That's his life. That's his, his service life is there. And 17 is the minimum service. He may serve about to 32 years. And he wants to be part of the unit. That's his family. 2 months a year he goes home, 10 months a year in the unit. And he knows that he has to be part of the group. For him, his section, his platoon, his squadron, his ship means everything to him. Because if he is found wanting, he is not treated as part of the team. We have to understand the intangibles, the feeling of the men. No, and there's no maafi galti in Fauj. You don't have maafi galti. I can't say I done a mistake, so two of my comrades have been killed or two of my buddies have been killed. That's not maafi galti. You may have certain, in another organization, you have certain losses in money and all that can be recovered. But here we're talking about life, we're talking about missions. You think a 4-year soldier who comes for 4 years will go for surgical strikes? I don't think so.
So how do other countries manage it? There are also other countries where you have short-term services, 3 years or 4 years. How do they manage it as compared to what we are planning to do?
See, when we talk about Israel, Israel is totally different, right? Their strategy is different. Their way of looking at war is different. They're looking at national defense is different. If 2 soldiers get killed, they're going to massive retaliation. Okay, so that is their way of
Right. Their strategy is very different.
Their strategy is not, it is not deterrence, it is massive retaliation. So they deter.
Right.
Right. If you look at the US, the US and Vietnam after that they learned their lessons. Right. Our security challenges are totally different. Our security, we got the longest unsettled borders or contested borders in the world, 348 kilometers along the India-China border. The LC is known to you. No one knows the LC better than you, other than even those who have served out there. They have not seen the other side. Okay, so you know the dynamics of the LC. You think a man with 4 years tenure, after 6 months of training, will fit into that environment? I don't think so. I don't think so.
That's a very challenging environment indeed. General Bhatia, I want to understand this particular part of your tweet. It will lead to militarization of society. Nearly 40,000 year on year back, rejected and dejected without a job, semi-trained in arms, ex-Agniveers. One could make the argument that Agniveers trained by the armed forces would actually be disciplined individuals, but you don't think that is going to be the case. You seem to think that they are going to be a problem. Why do you say that?
There's one word missing in that. I said semi-trained, not trained.
Right, semi-trained.
Right.
Sure.
Now, when you say semi-trained, that is where, when I say semi-trained, the attitude comes into being. Now, when this 40,000 go into this and 35,000 are not absorbed, they go back, I don't know how many of them will get a job, honestly. A lot of people are now coming up. At that point of time, no one was guaranteeing a job to them. So, what does that man do? Whatever money he gets, let's say 11.5 to 12 lakh rupees, this tweet was written earlier actually, before the modalities came out. Yeah. So, what does he do? It militarizes society. He is semi-trained in arms. He is a dejected man. You go back to the villages, he will say, तुम फेल होके आ गया फौज से, तुमने अच्छा काम नहीं किया फौज में. That's how he. He is a, everyone telling him you failed. No one's going to tell him you served. Okay, because he is not only selected as far as we are concerned, but as far as the village is concerned, he has failed and come back. Okay. So there are societal issues which we have to look at it. There will be, this may create law and order issues. This may create societal social problems. So but I think the key issue is Agniveers is one issue, but Agnipath, the scheme, is the issue. How does it impact the functioning, the effectiveness of armed forces has to be seen. That is the key issue.
Are you arguing that the Agniveers, when they go back into the society, will contribute to the militarization of society because this is a society, this is a country that is prone to riots, some communal riots, tensions, all kinds of issues. So these people going back to the society without proper jobs or security thereafter, after 4 years, will contribute to the pre-existing tensions in the society? Is that the argument?
It's a possibility. It's a possibility where they will be exploited. They are young minds. They will be influenced. So that's a possibility. But law and order problems also will rise.
Yes. Is there any part of the Agnipath scheme that you agree with, or is it an absolute no?
No, it can't be an absolute no. It rebalances our defense budget. It forces the armed forces to right size and rebalance. Okay, we have to look inwards also. There is a need to rebalance. We understand that at the national level, the competing priorities for the limited budgets, and the defense budget already limited. So we got to optimize the defense budget, which I think we not been able to do that somehow. Various committees, for the last so many years, including the Shiketkar committee in 2016, I was a member of that. But when you go to the implementation part, there is always, you always degrade that study and don't fully implement it. So we'll have to look at the defense budget, but in Agnipath we are looking at the defense budget only from the military point of view. The defense budget includes so many other organizations, other things. There are 500,000 civilian employees in that. No one looks at that ever. The Ordnance Factory Board is corporatized, but in addition, there are the 500,000 civil employees, 27 different organizations. Are we looking at that? No.
No, but I think the fundamental argument stands, right? I mean, you need schemes like the Agnipath, at least that's what people are arguing, to reduce the salary expenditure of the Indian military, and this money can be used for modernizing the Indian armed forces. That argument still stands. So to that extent, do you think this is a scheme that can reduce the salary and pensions and invest the same amount in modernizing the Indian armed forces?
Yes, it will reduce the salary and pension. You can modernize it, but in the end, it's the man behind the machine that matters. Let me quote General Patton, and no better soldier than him. And he says, the army is only as good as a soldier. He doesn't talk of machines. He doesn't talk of weapons. Right? And in any case, the Indian soldier costs the minimum and delivers the maximum. If you look at a lifetime cost of a soldier, he costs the minimum. It's good to say that soldier costs so much, but soldier he's a fighting man. He's a platform in itself in the army. So naturally, you have to pay for that platform. Given our terrain, high altitude terrain, our borders are the India-China borders. Average height is what 4,600 meters, or 18,000 feet. If you look at the line of control, Siachen line of control, it is mostly high altitude mountains. So if we look at that, I think we'll also have to look at the exploitation of technology as an aid. We should look at technology as force substitutor. But when you look at technology as a force multiplier, because force multipliers multiply forces, right? You get a force multiplier, you get technology. Who's going to maintain that? Who's going to sustain that? Who's going to train on that? Who's going to exploit it? So it's not so easy. So we'll have to take a very holistic view of the whole thing. But do not tinker with your strengths till your other alternates in place. That's what I'm trying to say.
Interesting. Do you think the leadership of the Indian Armed Forces are on board with this program? I know you can't speak for the current leadership of the Indian Armed Forces, but do you think they are fully on board with this plan? What's your sense?
See, I think I salute the leadership. I respect them. We are soldiers. We take orders. And once I take orders, I implement that orders. Once the order is given, I just execute it. There's no discussion thereafter. I'm a veteran today, so I can discuss it. If I was a uniformed man, I would make sure it succeeds.
But the professional has a role to tell the political leadership that's not.
I'm sure they must have told or not told. But as a soldier, we have to obey orders. We're not like the Pakistani army. We are Indian army, Indian armed forces. We will take orders of the government of the day, obey them, execute them, and ensure their success. And I salute the leadership for that. Irrespective of my personal conviction has no say whatsoever. I've been in service. It's not that every time you agreed with everything you got. But once a decision was given, right, wrong, ugly, you abided by the decision in letter and spirit and made sure it succeeded. And that is what the saving grace is going to be. The leadership of the Indian Armed Forces will ensure the success of the scheme. But again, it costs a little. You're disturbing a system. I've changed from destruction to disturbance.
General Bhatia, let me go back to the earlier question. There is only so much money that we can afford to earmark for defending the country, for armed forces. And a lot of that money actually goes into salaries and pension. You've been one of the senior most generals in the Indian Army. You are the DGMO. In your sort of informed understanding, how can India build a military which is technologically sophisticated, if not through schemes such as this? What are the alternatives available?
When you talk about technology, I'll give 2 points. One, most of the armed forces, about 70 to 80% is low to medium technologies. Right? It's only the final 15-20% we're talking about high technology. Right? Cutting edge technologies, 5 to 10%. New age warfare, we all understand that. It's not that we don't understand it. But in the end, it is the soldiers going to matter. What do the armed forces do? They ensure peace. How do they ensure peace? Through preparedness, defense preparedness, operation readiness. We are talking about war fighting as the first stage. War fighting is not the first stage. War fighting is the last stage. It's the last resort, right? If I come to war fighting as the first stage, we have failed as a nation, right? So I have to understand that I should not give a cause for the adversaries to wage a war on me. I deter them through my strengths. Okay. Now technology is not the only strength. We have technologies. Who's saying we don't have technologies? So we imbibe technologies. We definitely we exploit them, but there has to be
I get it. General Bhatia, what I'm trying to ask is that how and where do you cut down expenses in order to modernize the armed forces?
but right sizing. Not only right sizing the armed forces, right sizing the Ministry of Defence. I'll give you another idea.
You talked about the ordnance factors, you talked
No, no,
about civilian
I'm
employees.
I'm talking of security now.
Okay.
What are the and I'm not competing by the way. Let me not be compared. But I'm sure that the nation needs it. Central Armed Police Forces, they are growing day by day. Don't they cost money? They don't cost as much as army, but they cost money. All right.
Sure.
Right. Now the same Jawan, you say ITBP, right? He is also deployed on the altitude. Assam Rifles, also deployed on the Myanmar border and the city ops. He can serve till 58. That's okay. Right? The altitude is the same.
Right.
In border management job, he does the same job. But the army you need younger. Definitely we need younger army, but we need a judicial mix of youth and experience.
Right.
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 So when we look at the overall security apparatus, I think there's time to look at the overall security apparatus, not only the armed forces alone in isolation. Armed forces actually never fight. No, our border is defended by the border security force, the ITBP, the CRPF is there. So there are other elements out there. They have been growing continuously. Look at their strengths over the years, they've been growing. I'm not judging them that. I'm sure there must be a need they're growing. I'm not saying that. But then look at the nation should look at the overall security apparatus as one, the overall security architecture as one. Right now, even along the, the sensitive India-China border, you have two forces. Irrespective of the group of ministers report, ITBP reporting through the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Indian Armed Forces, Army and the Air Force reporting through the Ministry of Defence. Is it a good system? No, it's not a good system. So we cannot look at perfect systems. We have to look at optimal systems.
So in other words, you're saying when we talk about right sizing, we should not just talk about the armed forces.
Correct.
We should also talk about the paramilitary forces and other apparatuses.
Absolutely. And also civilians with the Ministry of Defence. Let's outsource a number of things we can do. Those 500,000 civilians, so many things are outsourced today. We don't need
500,000 civilians.
Yes, 500,000 civilians.
500,000 civilians.
500,000 civilians. 500,000 civilians.
Where are they employed?
Oh, there are many organizations. Some of them doing exceedingly well like border roads. Some of them not so well like military engineering services. There are 27 organizations. Right. Okay. And we need them. But do we need them in the present shape? No. Outsource things.
Right.
Where's the problem? Well, today, there's so many things that can be outsourced. Your transport can be outsourced. Your MES services can be outsourced. There's so many other things that are outsourced. Outsource it. Reduce the fixed costs. It can be done.
Right. Several top industry leaders in India have sort of lined up behind this plan. Mahindra Group, Anand Mahindra, Tata Sons Chairman, RPG Enterprises Chairman, TVS Motor Managing Director, etc., etc. They seem to think that Agniveers will be a disciplined workforce in future. It sounds like a good thing. What is your opinion about that?
Very good. But let them not assure, let them legislate. If you look at the 33rd report of the Standing Committee of Parliament of Defence, it categories, it's August 2017 report. It categorically gives out the percentage of external applied and who have been absorbed, and it is decimal, the record. I was on television the other day and with the captain of industry, and for the first time used strong words. I said, challenge you to post the number of ex-servicemen you employed on your portals. Please do that. The proof of the pudding is eating. Let's wait for it. Today, everyone, I can say anything out of 4, like I'm talking to you today, I can say anything out of 4 years, who will remember it? Right? We have short memories. But if there's a legislation like the CSR that you'll employ 0.1%, 0.1%, whatever it is, I don't say that. So give the Agniveers a fair deal, please. They have aspirations, the youth have aspirations. Let's not play with aspirations. It will be incorrect. Right.
What do you think about the protests against the Agnipath scheme? The government has been calling it politically motivated with vested interests. You had the NSA, Mr. Ajit Doval, saying that these are those who have no concern with the security of the nation, nor are they dedicated to the nation. They are conflict entrepreneurs. These are people who will go for stone throwing demonstrations and burning trains. And Agniveers will never be misled into this. I don't think any of these people, those protesting, are interested in joining the forces. What do you think about this assessment? Or put differently, what is your assessment of the ongoing protests against this declared scheme?
I think I condemn it totally. There's no question of violence. You want to come and serve the nation, that's what you aspire for, then there's something wrong with you. If you think you can burn buses and trains and create violence, it's absolutely wrong.
Yeah, but people have a right to protest in a democracy. These are,
Yeah,
it's
definitely,
about matter of
but
livelihood.
peaceful protest. You don't want burn public property. I've also tweeted on that. I don't think you not quoted that tweet because I've said categorically, don't do it, please. Please, it can't be condoned. You want to protest? There's ways and means of protest. You can't start burning things and destroying public property, creating. No, please don't do that. Let's behave like, first be a good citizen of the country. You want to be a soldier, be a good citizen of the country first, please.
Right. General, one or two general questions. In defense of the Agnipath scheme, India's defense modernization has been constantly invoked. In your assessment, where are we on the state of India's military reforms? Are we reforming at all?
Yes, I think that is something good that is happening. When you talk of Atmanirbharta, we were speaking about self-reliant defense management a long time. We got 2 corridors coming up. 3,500 crores have been earmarked for each of them. We have a negative list. We are moving towards it, definitely. The impetus has been given at a very good initiative. If you want strategic autonomy, you can't be importing 60% or 70% equipment. You can't be doing it. We are a great country. We are very proud citizens. Let us get defense manufacturing into place. It will also give us, that is where we should looking at. We have surge capacities, we have our own productions. Right? I don't need to have such a large inventory. That is where I save monies. That's what I'm saying. There are very, very many ways of doing it, rather than doing something which will impact the very strengths of our armed forces, which is the soldiers, sailors, air warriors. That is my key concern. So there are many other things which are already in place. Wait for them to fructify. And defense management, one of them, Atmanirbharta, will have to pay less cost of modernization. We start exporting, become a net exporter, let's say in the next 2 decades or so. It can be done. Import technologies, if you don't want to develop them, import it. So there is a number of things that can be done. But don't impact the strength of your armed forces. Our strength is our soldiers.
General Bhatia, I have one more question about the issue of CDS. The post of CDS has been vacant for almost 7 months now. The government recently modified the rules for the appointment of CDS, thereby increasing the pool of eligible candidates. Do you think such modification was necessary? Does it lead to, say, favoritism and unfair or foul play in the selection of CDS?
No, I don't think so. It's the prerogative of the government to select the CTS.
Yeah, but you're not in the service, but as an individual.
I think what they've done is they increased the base for selection, and at that level, how many reach that level? About 0.018% or 0.02%.
But generally, you do realize there is a difference between a serving military officer and a retired military officer.
Yes, there's a difference, definitely.
So, if a retired military officer gets appointed as a CDS, will he carry the same power or respect?
See, 2 things. One is the respect, second is authority. Authority comes to him from his appointment. Respect comes to him from being a good leader. And if he's retired, and I think that it's 2 years since retirement, because 62 years the age, so that means everyone retired 60. All the 3 started at 60. So I think he will carry it through. There's no harm in it. If they think the talent pool is more among the retired, they may be looking at someone who's senior to the 3 chiefs possibly. That is one of the reasons I can think of, because he would be senior to the 3 chiefs.
Let me give you an alternative scenario. You retire and then you while you are in service, you don't express your political opinions. After you retire, you can express your political opinions. You make your political opinions clear after you retire, and then you get appointed as the CDS because the ruling party likes you. Is that a possibility, or is that not a possibility?
After 40 years of being apolitical, I think we are apolitical.
You've seen enough generals who are political.
I don't know really, honestly. That's something which we start believing in. But we are political. I am apolitical. Today, if I am against the Agnipath, I was the first one to come and open in public and say the surgical strikes was the first time it happened in the history. And everyone quoted 5 other surgical strikes, right? And let me tell you, out of the 5, I was involved directly or indirectly in 4 of them. Right? But I was the first one to say that. So it is not, but I'm not going, I'm going as per the.
So you are saying there is no difference. It makes no difference whether you appoint a retired officer or a serving officer as the CDS.
I think it makes no difference.
Why is that you think we don't have a CDS yet? I mean,
that's something which is.
No, let's. I mean, I'm asking you a conceptual question. If we are serious about military reforms, then there has to be consistency in the appointment of the top military advisor to the government of India. 7 months, no CDS. What does that tell you about the seriousness of our defense reforms? As an individual, as an analyst, what does it tell you about the state of play as far as our defense reforms?
It surprises me because it puts back, among other things, the defense preparedness part of it, because that is the CDS's job right now, if you look at it, because operational readiness still remains with the chiefs. And 7 months, it will put back the theaterization integration, which is much needed reform. Because in the end, what do we want to do? I think for a risen, responsible, resilient India, regional power, a global leader, we want a military force to a military power. Right? Today we are a military force. We have to, become a military power in the next few years, in keeping with our national aspirations. That's our, that's our aspiration, the international aspirations. And if we go do that, there are certain things that, and the current government had set into motion. Now suddenly there's been a gap of 7 months. So I think it should be done. It should be done as soon as possible, and we should move towards, in the long term, all the defense reforms should be put into place to ensure that we become a military power.
Right. General Vinod Bhatia, excellent talking to you. Great conversation, great insights. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
I have enjoyed my conversation. Thank you much.
Get a sneak peek of exclusive content before everyone else for channel members only. Memberships start at ₹89. Hit the join button below.